This is me, heart and soul. Here's a part of me the world may never know. Here's my story. When I lose, I let my guard down. Here's the naked truth. I let my guard down. Here's the naked truth. I let my guard down. I let my guard down. I let my guard down. Here's the naked truth.
My people, how are you today? This is your boy Monroe, aka He Smiles, your essential life coach, and always the proud host of the Naked Truth Experience. I want to welcome you back. Now, listen, last week we had a little bit of a deviation from our normal programming. We came on a little bit earlier, but we wanted to do that. So we made sure that all of us, including myself, had the opportunity, if we chose to go ahead and watch the presidential debate. I went ahead and watched it. I watched it. That's what I'm going to say about it right now. But if you did, I definitely would love to get your comments throughout this show as to what you thought about it, your own personal analysis, as I come to you again in probably a deviation from what you're used to with the Naked Truth Experience in some way, just mainly the format, where it's just going to be me today. It's me and you today. No guests, no wine features. We're just going to have a conversation, and I'm going to be vulnerable, as I always am, but in a different way. So before we dive into all of that, again, I want to welcome everybody into the room. Please make sure you tell us where you are viewing from. Let us know who you are. Say hello to your neighbors. Join the community. And as always, I want to make sure that you're supporting us on social media. So please like, share, and subscribe. I can't tell you how important this is to really spread the message of the Naked Truth Experience and let people know that we're out there. But I want you to also jump in and continue the conversation in our Facebook chat group, right? The Naked Truth Experience. This is our Facebook group right here. And I want you to join that and we're going to continue to grow that and ramp up the conversation there. But this is a great way to get connected into what we're talking about pre and post show, right? Okay, so that's our social media. That's the like, share, and subscribe. Hopefully you're coming in the comments and letting people know how you're doing this evening, what's going on in your life, and possibly what are you sipping on. I'm not sipping on anything today. Let me tell you why. I'm a little nervous. This is my naked truth. Tonight's topic, I am going to just share my candid thoughts and analysis of what I believe a Biden or a Trump Black America would potentially look like. Now, when I tell you I'm a little nervous, and this is a new area of vulnerability for me, because I've said this in our Truth About the Vote episode, which is what we re-aired last week, that I have always exercised my right to vote since the age of 18, proudly, right? And understood it as my civic duty. And not only that, but just understood it as paying homage to the individuals who went before me, who died in many instances, who sacrificed in so many instances for me to be able to have this right. So I've always exercised it, but I've also stated that I've not been the most informed voter. Right? I've voted along my party lines. And in many instances, even as educated as a man as I am, in many instances, I've voted along maybe rhetoric or headlines, sound bites, or hearsay. That's my naked truth. And it is something that I'm not proud of, but it's also something that I'm not ashamed of, because I can understand that there are many different things that some of us need to acknowledge and to embrace so that we can change it going forward. And I've chosen to do that. One of the other things that I understand about change is that change is gradual for me. And for change to be sustainable, I have to be realistic about how I go about implementing that change. And me trying to start, just dive head first and feet first and just jump all into something. And, just in terms of, you may hear people say, go balls to the wall on some things. It doesn't really work for me like that. I have to gradually adopt change so that it becomes a part of my daily life or routine, of my consciousness, so on and so forth. And so I've definitely taken that strategy, right? And I've applied that strategy in me becoming more politically informed. A lot of my becoming more politically informed has really started with having conversations with people who are steeped in this topic, not so that I can adopt or adapt or, take on their ideas specifically, but so that I can begin to make some sense or to get some context of what is happening, of some of the things that I'm hearing. And it really does help to have these conversations with individuals so that we can begin to understand diverse perspectives, specifically also within the Black community. Because what I've found is that many of us have operated as if we're a monolith, as if we all think the same, as if we all believe the same. But it's just not true. Now, there are things that I would venture to say, as a Black community, have in common because of our common experiences. And I do not want to discount that, because I believe there is community and there is strength when we do unite in a lot of our thought, and really specifically towards specific goals, right? One of those should hopefully be equality and equity within our society, and to dismantle systemic racism, right? I don't think anybody in Black America should diverge from believing that systemic racism should not be in existence. What I am finding, though, in some of our conversations, and I'm having some issue with that personally, is as I've been doing my research outside of even just personal conversations, but listening to conservative Black individuals, say like Candace Owens, I'm finding that some don't even believe systemic racism exists or is a problem, and that everything is just based on merit. Now, I don't want to misquote anyone, but this is the gist of what I'm getting when I'm having conversations or when I'm listening to diverse perspectives from individuals that I think, for me, would be a problematic perspective. But that's just one. And I don't mean to ramble on, but I want you to understand where I'm coming from here. And really, in my process of trying to become more politically informed so that the decisions that I make on November 3rd, the decisions that I make in my local elections, the decisions that I make in whether I support a policy or not, are based on things that I've been able to draw conclusions upon from the research, right? From the stories, from the data that is presented to me and that I've been able to analyze and digest. And then again, make sure that that aligns with what is important to me. What outcomes do I want for myself, my family, and my community at large? So if you're like me and this narrative resonates with you, get in the chat. Let me know, how are you, or how have you decided, if this is the time that you've become more engaged, to attempt to inform yourself or to get more informed. I think one of the challenges out there, and again, I'll just speak for me, is that there is an abundance of information, right? You can Google and you can type in keywords and phrases, and you're going to get a litany of information that comes in and says one point, but then you can also find one that almost inevitably will counter that other argument. And again, thinking about having a diverse perspective is important, so that it will help, round out the argument and give context, and make sure that there's as little bias as possible when we're hopefully just stating the facts. It can still be overwhelming and daunting to try to sift through all of the information. To sift through all of this information and then begin to understand and parse out what is fact and what's fiction. And in some instances, things are just blatant fabrications, right? Or sometimes exaggerations, or sometimes not put in context. And these are the things that, can confuse individuals like myself, or in some cases, right, even though I have never decided not to participate in voting, I've yet become passive in exercising my right. Now, some may not exercise the right, and the barrage of information, the overwhelming feeling could potentially paralyze their vote, right? To just say, I'm not going to do this at all. I'm not going to participate at all because I don't know who to believe in. I don't know what's true. I don't know what's right. And what we know is that this election, amongst every other election, is important, but this election is of great consequence. And so there's a lot of emphasis on making sure people actually exercise their right to vote, the ones who do have the right to vote, because we know that there are individuals in this society that don't have the right to vote, which makes it even more important for us who have the right to vote to be able to do it. But I understand. Hear what I'm saying. I understand that in light of everything that you are dealing with, right? I watched this report on CNN where they talked about, they were profiling Black voters in Detroit, Michigan. And I heard this one woman say, and she had openly admitted that she didn't vote. I heard her say, she was like, listen, I know what you're trying to say to me, because it was profiling a woman who's getting out there and getting the information into the hands of everyday people to make sure that they understand the importance of voting. But this woman says, listen, I know what you're saying is important, but I'm trying to feed my kids, right? I'm trying to keep the lights on. I got to go to work, right? There's all of these competing priorities when it comes to even thinking about not just the act of voting, but then even understanding what's going on out there, and deciphering through all of the messages. That can be overwhelming when you have a single mother, when you have a father, when you have a grandmother or an auntie or some type of caretaker who is responsible for other human lives other than their own, and they can't even figure out how to keep the lights on or how to keep food on the table. And then to hear from white men, white, wealthy, white, privileged, wealthy men who have access to healthcare, to education, right, to all of these services, right, that give them the leg up. When you hear them trying to tell you what they're going to do for your community, a lot of times it can seem disingenuous and will fall on deaf ears. And so I understand that. I understand how someone can say, listen, I know it's important, but this is more important. And whatever that this is, in many instances, is do or die. And so, in understanding that and not judging an individual, I definitely want, and it's my hope that if you're tuning in here today and you're one of those individuals or someone like that, I'm speaking to where you are. I'm understanding, and I'm wanting to let you know that I understand that it is not easy. And even when I've heard people say, maybe sometimes facetiously, reading is fundamental, and that all it takes is you do your research and figure out fact finding. Like, the naked truth is, people don't always have time to do that. I'm just going to put it out there, and you may disagree with me, but I know that in coming from a single parent home with a mother who worked her ass off every single day and who, wanted to make sure that I had everything I needed, I saw the exhaustion. I understood the mental and the physical fatigue that went into doing things on your own to make sure that you and your child or children are cared for and taken care of, right? So I understand. So I'm not going to say to you, reading is fundamental. I'm not going to say to you, well, the information is out there and it's accessible to you, right? At the same time, I am still going to instill or to support accountability for all of us for all of us to do some due diligence in making sure that the state of our country does not continue to deteriorate. And that's important. And you need to find ways that are sympathetic and understanding to your situation so that you are able to participate in some way, right? But I'm not going to stand here and tell you this is what you must do. I'm going to ask that you do something. Even if that is having a conversation with loved ones, being honest and saying, you know what, hey, I know this is important coming up. I'm not too sure on, what the real issue is. Can you, if you've got some more insight, let's have a conversation about it, right? If it's in the barbershop, if it's while you're getting your hair done, if it's while you're eating a meal or breaking bread together, if you decide, you know what, we'll turn off the TV just for this one night, there might be some ways in which we can start to engage in the conversation that helps us become more informed about the issues, about the candidates, and essentially about things that decide quality of life for us and so many others. And I'm speaking to us as Black people, Black folks, African Americans, however you identify, but Black people. That's what I'm speaking to, right? So I understand. Now, many of us who have our essential needs met, food, shelter, right? Clothes on our backs, right? Safety, relatively, right? Because we can talk about that. We can dive into that. It may not be as consequential we think about the outcome of this election, because if you've been able to maintain the status quo under the current administration, you may say, well, I mean, yes, it would be unfortunate if the way America has, the current state of America, right, both in policy and in its sentiment and feeling, with the racial tension that is happening, the continued proliferation of injustice, and perpetuation of injustice, right, across this country. Some may say, well, listen, it's not as important, or it's not a priority for me to maybe even exercise the right to vote, because you thinking in your kind of micro environment that it's not really affecting me as much. And I challenge that. I'm not judging that. I challenge that. And I challenge those of us who do have some of these essential needs secure. And I put that in quotes because, again, I say that in relative terms. This day and age, we've all seen, especially with the coronavirus, that the things that the employment, the housing, the healthcare, the health, the state of your health, all of that has in some ways become very unstable for a lot of individuals that consider themselves to be safe, secure, and to be stable. So I'm challenging that for anybody who may take on that mindset or thought that there's not consequence for you, particularly if you want to just keep it to a you thing and what's in it for you. But I would also implore you to please think about the greater picture, your neighbor, your family member, right? Your coworker, somebody who is connected to you, somebody who you care about, somebody who you love is inevitably, disproportionately, unjustly affected by what is happening in these elections and in the policies that are created and enforced by who is in power. So I want you to think about that, if that applies to you. So, again, in thinking about a Trump Black America, a Biden Black America, I wanted to just think about it in terms of three areas. One being the economy, right? And I polled some of our viewers and asked them, like, what comes up for you as a Black American? The other one is COVID-19. I've mentioned that, right? COVID-19 and obviously health disparities that have been further highlighted as a result of that. And then finally, the third one is going to be the criminal justice, right? Criminal justice system, mass incarceration, all of these things, police brutality, right? All of these things that are in our faces every single day. And I'll go back to this piece on thinking that some of us who may have certain privileges, certain access, may believe that we are insular or insulated from these systemic issues, even criminal justice, right? But we know in many instances that it does not matter the bank account, the degrees you hold, your status in the community, your socioeconomic status, that you too are vulnerable. That we're all vulnerable. If you haven't taken a moment to check out what Biden is saying, what his administration would do for Black America, I just want to let you know, and I'm not going to go through this whole thing one by one because it's extensive, and not only is it extensive, but again, you have to read between the lines. You have to interpret what is said and what is not being said, but then also get context. So it's a lot to unpack. I'm not even going to lie. It's a lot to unpack. But to even start, if you even want to know what the Biden campaign is saying, he's put out the Lift Every Voice, the Biden plan for Black America, which here in print is about 30 pages long. Okay. So this here is where you can start to even begin to understand what is the Biden-Harris campaign saying on some of these issues. And they talk about these issues, the economy, COVID-19, and criminal justice reform. Contrastly, if you are interested in understanding what the current administration is saying, President Trump is saying about his plan and his administration's plan for Black America for the next 4 years, you can refer to this 2-page plan that is straight from, and these are straight from both of the candidates' website, but this one is the Platinum Plan. And it has President Trump's pillars for what he will do for Black America. Now, many of us know he has openly stated that his administration, and he in particular, has done more for Black Americans than any other president besides Abraham Lincoln. Now, again, I don't want to get into too much personal commentary on either candidate, but I want us to really think about the rhetoric that goes forward, the sound bites. And this is what's scary, because as you are trying to become more politically informed, it is hard. Remember what I go back to when I was saying in my opening, talking about my naked truth. It's hard sometimes to get away from the headlines. It's hard sometimes to not hear the sound bites that are repeated over and over and over again ad nauseum, right? But you have to, right? You have to read below the surface level because in many instances it is taken out of context. It is misleading or it is just untrue, right? It's just untrue. So when we talk about a Black America under either of these administrations, we can start with, first of all, what are you saying? What are you proposing? I think if we're diving into around the economy for the Biden Harris administration, you know, a lot of it is speaking to small businesses and entrepreneurship for Black Americans. And as you sift through the plan, there's proposals for a lot of funding that will aid individuals to get loans and to get capital to be able to start a business. I did a show probably a few weeks ago. I did a two-part series on the American dream, the myth, right? And we were talking about Black entrepreneurship. And I had a lovely individual on, Amara, who's the CEO and proprietor of Lovely Wines. And I had stated a statistic that Black women were the fastest group of individuals who were starting new businesses. Yet they are still disproportionately denied access to funding, right? So when you start to dive into the Biden plan, you know, there's double funding for state small business credit initiative, expand the new markets tax credit, which makes program permanent, and double community development financial institutions fund, the CDFI. Now, if you've never heard of some of these things, it's good to, once you read the plan, to then actually you may need to Google these acronyms. You may need to Google some of these statutes or mandates that are already in place that they're saying that they want to expand upon. Provide African American entrepreneurs and other small business owners technical assistance. So not only are you, you know, having to start a business, but some of the privilege of legacy individuals, right, who have come from entrepreneurship, they have insight as to how these things work, how to sustain businesses. Well, it's important, and what the Biden administration is talking about is providing technical assistance to those organizations. I think when we start to look at the economy and its intersection with COVID-19, Black businesses, once again, have been disproportionately underfunded in the relief efforts. When it talks about the paycheck protection policy, that I believe 90% were denied of the Black businesses. 90% did not receive the funding that was actually put in place to hold their businesses in place through this pandemic. So when we think about the smaller number of percentage of, and I believe if I say this correctly, no, I don't want to quote that. I'm not going to get into that. There was a statistic about the number of entrepreneurs in this country that are Black owned businesses, and it's not proportionate to our representation in America. And I think we're about 13% of the population, yet we're only about 4% represented in all entrepreneurship. Don't quote me on that. I've been doing a lot of reading and research. So, but again, we're showing some disproportionate. I think in there, we're talking about also protections for homeowners during the COVID-19 crisis, is spelled out here in the Biden plan. So when you want to talk about the economy, we're talking about home ownership. We're talking about small business entrepreneurship, right? We're talking about that, and really helping to mobilize the economic status of the Black community. So there's a lot of things in the Biden plan that they're talking about: turning unemployment insurance into employment insurance. Again, protections for essential workers in the COVID-19 era. The facts are is that we disproportionately, right, occupy the bulk of jobs when it comes to essential workers. And so therefore, in these essential worker status, you and I, who are representatives of the Black community have been disproportionately impacted health-wise by COVID-19 because of just merely by the occupations that we hold, right? So just thinking about that is something that you want to take into consideration when we're thinking about a Biden versus Trump Black America. One thing that he also brings out here is addressing the African American student debt crisis. And one of the things he's proposing is that anybody forgiving all undergraduate tuition related federal student debt for 2- and 4-year public colleges for debt holders earning up to $125,000. And this will also include tuition from private HBCUs. So that's something that I think people need to really pay attention to. I, as a 6-digit student loan holder, hear what I'm saying? I owe in the 6 digits, and I know I'm not the only one in student loan debt. This is something that definitely speaks to me and is worth me definitely diving into to figure out how can I hold an administration accountable for helping relieve some of the debt that is very oppressive in many different ways. So when we're thinking about that, one of the things that when we talk about criminal justice reform and just kind of moving into that, one of the challenges that I have with this administration, and there's many, but one of the challenges that I have is that this administration, this president, doesn't even recognize the existence of systemic racism, despite all of the evidence, right? All of the data, all of the stories that support the long history of systemic and institutionalized racism that exists within every aspect of our existence in this country. And I'm only speaking to this country, not to say that it does not permeate throughout the world, but I'm speaking to America. For me, it is troubling because if you cannot recognize that fundamental fact, anything that you may propose in these 2 pages, for me, does not address the real issues. That's my challenge from the gate. That is what causes pause and skepticism. Because if you cannot even acknowledge the fact, and our current president and members of his administration have said it publicly over and over again that they do not believe systemic racism exists. So when I look at plans, and this is just my suggestion for you, when I look at a plan for either administration that is putting forward about what is going to impact us as Black Americans, I need you to first call it out. Say what it is. Say what it is. Say what the source is. And no, that is not in any way saying that all of the responsibility to cure the ills within our society purely rest on one group. That is not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that if you cannot even acknowledge, even substantiate that something, what has been so prevalent in the lives of millions and millions of people for centuries exists, that is where I have a problem, a major problem. That's where we start. So I want you to think about that as you are thinking about an administration's promises on either side that they're making. Can you even acknowledge, can you call a spade, is what they say, right? Can you call a spade a spade? So when we think about that, listen, I'm not gonna, I actually need to close out, but I wanted to pull a couple of things out, and when we talk about the platinum plan, what is being proposed by President Trump, he's saying increase access to capital in Black communities by almost 500 billion, and it's talking about 3 million new jobs for the Black community, creating 500,000 new Black-owned businesses. So again, putting emphasis on the economics and the job market and the access to capital so that businesses can exist or can be created. My challenge is, and again, I would implore all of you to please, check this out for yourself, is that I don't necessarily see the legs for this. I don't necessarily see how this is going to happen, which for me seems and feels like more rhetoric for promises that I don't feel like are intended to be kept, but are very self-serving in the moment. And in the moment is we have an election coming up. So this is where I'm just going to wrap up. I want to thank you for being with me today. For those of you who have stuck with me, and hopefully you've been in the comments and you've responded and reacted to what we're saying here, because I definitely want to hear from you, and I will be in the comments as well. But I just want you to, hopefully you heard something in my own admission, in my own naked truth, that resonates with you, and or that has caused you to maybe think about something in a different way, or that even if it caused you a visceral reaction, and you had a strong response to it, like it's hopefully something these discussions make us think, make us really understand why we believe what we believe, or say what we say, or do what we do, and take a critical lens to those motivations, but then to also be inspired to action, to do something. And there's a lot of things that we can theoretically do. There's a lot of things, and again, I'll go back to, you've got to figure out what your advocacy looks like, what your action looks like in response to who you are, your condition, so on and so forth. But I am going to ask each one of you who have the right. And even if you're on the journey like I am, remember, it's a gradual process. I'm learning. And I'm going to be more informed for the next election, and not just the presidential election, but my next local election, because of where I've started today. So I want to give someone hope who's like me and saying, where do I begin? Or will I ever get to this place of feeling informed? I just want you to know that at least we can start this Tuesday, November 3rd, by exercising our right to vote. And I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I'm sure you can deduce from my, who I am, not even just in this particular broadcast, but if you've heard what I've talked about and what I stand for, you will probably know who I better align with, who I feel like I may be able to hold more accountable. That is your decision to make for you. I'm making mine on November the 3rd, but I need you to make a decision. I'm asking you to make a decision, and I'm asking that if you already haven't done so in early voting, that you make your decision known. Make it known. Whatever you decide, own it. Take responsibility for it. Right? Because at the end of the day, again, we all have to take responsibility and embrace who we are, the actions we've done, right? And even if those actions have caused some hurt, some challenges, some pain, either for ourselves or others, by acknowledging it and owning it, we have the ability to change it. All right. And we have the ability to change what is happening in our society today. Please make sure that you don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We want to make sure that this message, we want to make sure that as many people as possible are exposed to the naked truth so that they too can share their naked truth and hopefully heal in some way. And make sure you also jump into our Facebook group. As always, I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in tonight. This is our last show for October, so we will be coming out with the calendar very shortly for the November shows, and I guarantee you, you do not want to miss an episode. As I always say, have a wonderful night.